So I want to finish up this site plan, and I'm going to cover just some really minor, quick annotations, things that we kind of add to a site plan to really complete the site plan. So things like the property line, our building line, so the outline of the actual building, maybe some vegetation, dimensioning to the property lines, and then what I like to do on these site plans is kind of convert a roof plan and a site plan. Technically, a roof plan and a site plan are not the same thing, but to really preserve space, save space on one less sheet we have to print out, I like to add the roof plan with the site plan. Most plan checkers will allow it, although they sometimes don't like it. But you can always, you can typically get by merging the roof plan and the site plan together. So that's what we're going to do in this one drawing. Now, right now I have a site plan with the topography and a driveway. If you wanted to add more kind of hardscape, then by all means, feel free to do so using the subdivision tool. But getting into or jumping into the site plan, the very first thing is actually to set it on the sheet we're going to be printing on. Okay. Right now, the scale is, and the reason for that is so that we could determine the actual scale. Right now, it's 1 inch equals 20 feet, which is an engineering scale. And you will typically go with an engineering scale for very large scale projects, so multi-unit complexes. But for something like this, we might be able to get by just with an architectural scale, but we won't know until we actually put the drawing onto a sheet. So I'm going to come down to my sheet. So the C1 site plan. Okay. So I'll double click inside here. I'm not going to get into the title block or the changing the sheet numbers just yet. Right now, I just care about the scale of my drawing. So I'm going to come over here, click and drag my site plan. And there's my site plan. It is very small. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just double click on the inside. You notice when I place my cursor, I get this kind of black line all around. I'll go ahead and double click, and that takes me into my site plan drawing. But here I can go ahead and change my scale. So I'm going to click, and let's start off with the 16th inch scale. Okay, so that got bigger, but it looks like I could go up another. So let's go 1/8 inch. So really quickly, do not get confused. So the architectural scales are the ones that end in equals to 1 foot. All of the other ones that say 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, these are engineering scales. Okay. So we try avoiding those because we don't work in engineering scales. All the rest of our drawings are in the architectural scales. So those are the ones we want to try to stick to. So I'm going to jump to 1/8. Okay, now that looks like we should be able to get that to fit. Let me double click on the outside. So it's going to bring me back into kind of my paper space. And let me go ahead and click and drag. Okay, so there we have it at 1/8 inch. We might be able to go one size larger. So let's double click and 1/8. Let's go 3/16. Oh, maybe not. Let's see, maybe. Let's click and place it. Nope, that's not going to work. So it's not going to fit on our sheet size. So that means I'm going to have to double click inside and let's go back to 1/8 inch. So 1/8 inch scale is the largest scale we can use so that the drawing itself fits onto our sheet. Okay, so now that I have the scale set, now I could go ahead and start making my annotations and the changes depending on and base them off of an 1/8 inch scale because I know that the scale is no longer going to change and 1/8 inch is what the scale of the drawing is going to be. So now that I have that, let's go back to the actual site plan. And what I'm going to start off with is just adding the property line. I'm going to do that by going up to Massing and Site, and we have a tab that says Property Line. Okay. Now, right now, the line that we see is this white line. This is the edge of our topography. Okay. Now, typically, we like to see our property line kind of on the inside here, just a bit, so that we see kind of how the topography goes past our property. If we need to connect, let's say a contour line to a line that's outside of our property line, so that it kind of blends in to the topography that is outside of our property, we kind of need to see that. So for that reason, I'm going to draw the property line inside of the edge here. So I'm going to click on property line, create by sketching. Now at this point, I can go ahead and draw whatever property line I'd like. But what I'm going to do is actually use my pick lines command, okay, which is going to allow me to pick these lines. But if I pick these lines, these are the edge. This is the line that represents the edge of my topography. So I actually want this line, but I want it offset in. So that's where this, up in the options bar, we have this offset tab. So I'm going to offset, let's say 2 feet. What does that look like? That's perfect. So I'm going to offset 2 feet. I'm going to click that line. And now I'm just going to click on all of my lines, making sure that the offset is on the inside. Click there. It'll even offset the curves. And there we have it. Okay. Again, we are in sketch mode, so all the sketch mode commands or the rules apply, right? No overlapping lines, no intersecting lines, no gaps, one continuous set of lines that connect. So we meet those, we'll hit the check mark, and there's our property line. Quite simple, right? Okay. The next step is our boundary, is the outline of our building. Right now we could see the building because we're in wireframe mode. But in a roof plan or in a site plan, we shouldn't, the wireframe mode in and of itself is pretty confusing, especially if you're not familiar with the project. Okay. Now we wouldn't submit to the city or we wouldn't show a client or a contractor the wireframe mode because it's confusing. So we would typically go into hidden line. Now the problem with hidden line is that it shows me the outline of my roof. It does not show me the outline of the perimeter of my building. Okay. There is an overhang, right? If we go to one of my elevations, you guys should know at this point. All right, there's an overhang. So what I'm seeing is this line here. What I really want to know is this line, the edge of my exterior wall. The reason why that's important, the reason why it's important to know where the boundary of the actual walls are is because one of the building codes that every plan checker is going to ask is what are your setbacks? So for example, a standard setback is that you cannot build within the first 20 or 25 feet, depending on the cities, the first 20, 25 feet from the front property line. So typically you can't build right up to the property line. There's a front yard setback of 20 to 25 feet. Now, if I dimension, and again, we just made this property line, so it's kind of irrelevant. Oh, well, we would have met it, right? That's 22 feet, but that's not my building. My building is actually farther inset, okay? So they don't count overhangs, they count the actual exterior wall. So when we do dimensions on a site plan, our dimensions are to the building exterior wall, not to the actual roof overhang. So for that reason, we need to see the building, the exterior or the outline of our exterior walls. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is bring back hidden lines. Sorry, go back to wireframe. And then I'm going to go up to the Annotate tab. And in the Annotate tab, we have this detail panel. And this is where we could go ahead and add two-dimensional lines. What I mean by two-dimensional lines is that what I'm going to do is draw a line on my site plan, but it's not going to actually draw it in the actual model. It's just going to really draw it in a 2D as if it was on a sheet of paper. Okay, it's not going to actually exist in the three-dimensional model. So when we go to the site plan, we have our detail line. So I'll click on detail line, and then we have line style over here on the right-hand side. Now, if you know orthographic projections, which at this point we should all know orthographic projections, we have a certain type of line that represents objects that are behind a solid object. So in other words, we have hidden lines, which is a line type that we use to represent an object that is hidden behind another object in front of us. So in this case, I'm looking down to the roof. What I want to see is the walls that are hidden behind the roof. So I would use the hidden line. Okay. And now using my draw tools, I can go around and draw the outline of my building. Okay. But the outline of my building is already there. So there's a faster way of doing this, and that's simply to use the Pick Lines tool. So if I click on the Pick Lines tool, all I have to do is pick the line that I want to copy, and it'll automatically draw, use the line style that I have selected to draw that one line. So now I could go around over here. I could come back over here on this side, click that line, there, click there. Now it's a little confusing, right? Because these lines are overlapping, so you really can't see. You could kind of see, if you pay close attention, you could kind of see like a green line there, then a white line, and then a green line, and a white line, and a green line. That's my hidden line. Whereas if over here where I haven't clicked it, it's just a solid white line. I'll click, and now you can kind of see that there's a hidden line there. I'll go ahead and click on this one. And when I'm done, I'll just hit the escape key twice to get out of my annotate tab. And I'm going to change my display setting back to hidden line. And now what we're left with is this green line, which represents the outline of my building, which is exactly what I want. However, I don't want it to print green. And at this point, it is going to print green. So we need to make that change. The place we go to make changes for our lines is back in our settings. So we're going to go up to Manage, Additional Settings, Line Styles. Okay, Manage Additional Setting, Line Styles. And here we have a category called Lines, and it's showing me that the line color is green. But I also have this plus sign. So I'm going to click on the plus sign, and that's going to give me all of my line types that I have in Revit. Okay. Now you should know that this is where we select or we edit all of the lines within Revit, within our Revit model. Okay. So if you ever want to make any changes to our lines, to maybe the thickness of our lines, the color of our lines, the line pattern, this is where we would come. So I'm going to come down to hidden line because that's the one that's green. And if I come over here, you'll notice that sure enough, it's green. So I'm going to click inside here and I'm going to change that to black. I'll hit OK. I'll hit apply and then OK. And now you'll see that my line, although it's white, will end up printing black. Okay. Now the one thing that's been bothering me this entire time is this REF and this base point symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and just hide them. REF represents the refrigerator. And for some reason, the tab or the refrigerator tag or the text shows up in my site plan. Okay. So all I'm going to do is simply just do a little cross window around it, right click and hide in view element. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with these base points. Right click, hide in view elements. Okay. So now we have our property line and we have our building outline underneath our roof. The next thing I want to cover is dimensioning. So we need to dimension to at least two property lines, right? So I need two dimensions. Now it's pretty simple, or it's pretty straightforward, right? When we've covered dimensioning before, it's simply dimension to the building outline and then to our property line. And that's fine when the lines are parallel to one another. But what happens if I want to dimension on this side of the building where I have a line that is not parallel, or sometimes it's even a curve? You'll notice that it does not want to grab the line. Okay, so I can't just kind of click. I can't click just right there. So I'm going to have to kind of fake it a little bit. What I'm going to do is go back to my Annotate tab and draw another detail line. I'll click on the detail line. And what I'm going to do is draw a line where I'm going to want a dimension 2, create that dimension, and then make that line really tiny so that nobody ever sees it. So we're going to change the line style. We're just going to click to thin lines. And let's say I want a dimension to this point over here. I'll just draw a line wherever it is I want a dimension to. Make sure that it's a straight line. More importantly, make sure that it's parallel to where I'm going to dimension to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just draw that line right there. Now I can go ahead and dimension from this line to that line. And what I like to do is place the dimension where these two intersect. Okay, so I'm going to place it right there. Okay. And now I have a dimension at an angle to the property line that's at an angle. However, I still have that one line, and if I was to delete it, it deletes the dimension itself. So let me undo that, Control Z. What I can do is select it and just bring it straight down. And we want to make it as kind of small as we can. Now remember, the dimension itself has these little kind of tick marks and these extension lines. So it's okay to see some of that line because it's going to be hidden as the dimension. Right? So now we know how to dimension to a line that is not parallel to our building outline. And then lastly, what I wanted to do is go over vegetation. So I'm going to go over here to massing in site component, and then we click on the pull down, and we have all sorts of trees that we could select. So I can begin to just say add a tree here, add another tree there, change the tree up. Maybe it's a 10-foot tree I want to place there. Now, maybe I want to do a couple of these larger trees in the back. I wouldn't recommend adding trees kind of closer to the end of the project. You want to, they actually don't take up a whole lot of space the way they would in kind of other 3D models. That's because they're pretty flat three-dimensional objects. So let's go to the 3D view and you'll see this is what I get. Okay. So we can go ahead and add them right now. And it's not going to do a whole lot as far as slowing down our computer because you can see they're pretty two-dimensional, right? They're pretty flat. However, once we hit render on the computer, then they'll go ahead and render as three-dimensional plants or three-dimensional trees. So let's go ahead and click down here and let's go to realistic. And there you see what they actually what it'll actually look like. Now, depending on your graphics card and your computer, this might take longer, or it might just be really quickly. If you have a good graphics card, you should be able to just kind of orbit around. But the more plants, the more vegetation you add, the slower the computer is going to run. So I only recommend viewing the trees in this realistic view temporarily just to kind of get the feel that you need, and then jump back to hidden line or shaded view, whichever you prefer, just so that you can keep on working without any problems. Okay, so there you have it. We now have a site plan, okay, that has the property line, it has the building outline, it has dimensionings to a line that's parallel or to a line that is not parallel, and then we have some vegetation. So this already looks a lot better than when we started. Okay, and that's how we do a site plan. Good luck, everyone.